Hey, welcome to Let's Eat with Russ. Today I'm going to make a pie crust. Show you how I make it. Basically, you want to prep the butter first. You got to cut it up into small little cubes, and you want to pop it in the freezer for a good 15 or 20 minutes. Make sure it's nice and firm and hardened up. So for this recipe, it's going to take 2 sticks of butter, which is a cup. But 2 sticks is simple. So I like to go about, maybe 1/4 inch thick with my slices here. And then same thing, I try to keep it about that same so they're sort of square. So that's about what we're shooting for. I try to kind of break them apart and spread them around a little bit because, like I said, we're going to pop this in the freezer. So once they freeze together, it's a little harder to separate them. So if you have room on your cutting board, you can kind of spread them out a little bit. If they're a little bit stuck together, you can kind of break them apart when they're frozen too. It's not the end of the world either way. So that's about good as far as the sizing. I won't make you watch me slice butter, so I'm going to get this prepped up and be right back. Okay, so the butter's all chopped up and prepped, so I'm just going to pop the whole cutting board in the freezer just like this. Give it 15-20 minutes, just so it's nice and firm, and then I'll show you the next steps after that's ready. All right, so just got our butter out of the freezer. It's nice and cold, ready to go. And set that aside for half a second here. So we're going to use 2½ cups of all-purpose flour, and I'm going to put in most of it, about 1.5 cups. Save around a cup or so. And then we got about a teaspoon of salt. And about a tablespoon of sugar. This is optional. I'm using the sugar because I'm actually going to use this particular crust for an apple pie, so it's a sweet pie. The crust won't taste sweet anyway, but if you were doing like something more savory, you can omit the sugar, it won't matter. Then I'm just going to kind of whisk those dry ingredients together real quick. Good enough. And then we'll go ahead and scrape our butter chunks in there. You might even want to do this by hand so you can kind of break up the pieces a little bit because they kind of stick together when they're in the freezer. But you do want the butter to be very cold. Get all this in here. Try to break it up a little. I mean, it's all cut, but they just get stuck together in the freezer sometimes. And we just want to kind of coat all of the butter with the flour mixture. Kind of break up some of those stuck together chunks a little bit with your spatula also while you're doing this part. That's about good enough. And if you have a food processor, you can do this faster and easier. I like to do it by hand just so I can show it to people who maybe don't have that kind of equipment to use on hand. You can still do it by hand, it's just a little bit more labor intensive. So a pastry cutter comes in handy. You can technically do this even without a pastry cutter. I've done it with an ulu knife, which I have another video showing you what that is and how to use one. It just takes more work because that's only one blade where this is 4. So basically you just want to get that butter and flour, chop up those chunks of cold butter until it starts to almost resemble like breadcrumbs, sort of. So this will just take a few minutes to get this going here. Occasionally you might want to Scrape off your cutter. Okay, so now that we got that to about this consistency is pretty good, go ahead and dump in the rest of our flour. Just get that mixed together. Probably wouldn't hurt to give it another quick hit with the pastry knife, pastry cutter. That looks pretty good. So once that part's ready, we need to get to the ice water, which I forgot to prep, so I'm going to get that right now. All right, now we got our ice water. So we're going to need anywhere from usually about 3 to 6 tablespoons of ice water. So you want to start with 3 or 4. We'll start giving that a stir, and it'll start to kind of form into a dough, and you can kind of just press it with the spoon or squeeze a little bit of it between like your thumb and forefinger and see how well it starts to clump together. See, I can already tell I'm going to need more ice water for this. It's nowhere close. So I'm going to add another couple here. Again, this would be faster with a food processor. Sometimes I even actually just do it by hand, just because it's a little bit faster than with a spoon. Yeah, I don't think, see, when it falls apart like that, it's not ready, it needs more water. So I'm gonna give it a couple more. Actually, I think I am just going to get in with my hand here so I can get a better sense of how well it's starting to stick together. Yeah, it's getting closer. And now it's starting to look like pie crust dough. So see, now when I squeeze it, it wants to stick together. So I'm just going to get the rest of this flour incorporated. Might need 1 more tablespoon of ice water, but this will probably about do it. Yeah, I think that's good enough. So then what you're going to want to do is just basically flop it out onto the counter. And just kind of work it for a minute or two until it kind of really forms up into, you know, good solid together dough. That's about good enough. So that's pretty much all there is to it. Then at this point, what you would want to do, especially in this case, I'm going to make an apple pie this time with this. So I'm going to kind of split it into 2 separate balls. Flatten those into little discs. And that's about good enough. Then what you're going to want to do is wrap these in plastic wrap and throw them in the fridge for at least an hour, or even up to a couple of days if you wanted to do this part in advance. You can also freeze the dough for up to a few months. So I just get those wrapped up in plastic wrap. And pop them in the fridge for an hour or so. And then I'll show you how to prep it and roll it out to get it into a pie pan. All right, so now I'm going to show you how I roll out the pie crust and get it into the pie pan. You're obviously going to start with dusting your work surface with some flour, just to keep it from sticking. And then we'll unwrap the first of our discs here. You want to pull these out of the fridge 5 to maybe even 15 minutes or so before you're ready to roll it out from the fridge, just so it's not quite as hard. Put a little bit of that on top of the disc. Never hurts to flour up your rolling pin. And you want to kind of roll from the center out. Flip that over. Try to repair that crack a little bit. Yeah, it should be about good. So when you bring in your pie plate, I'm using a pretty good sized glass one. I like these. You can do it with the little metal ones, the little aluminum ones. I prefer the larger. So the easiest way to get this from the countertop into the pie plate, for me anyway, is to fold it in half and then pick it up and try to lay it across the center of your, or with the edge rather, across the center of your pie plate, and then just unfold it. And there you go. So you need it to be a little bigger than your pie plate because you got to obviously cover the cavity and the side walls. So we'll get that tucked in there. Oops, tore it a little bit. Still malleable and easy to repair. And you can tear off the excess, and I'll show you a use for extra pie crust in a little bit on my apple pie video. You can use leftover pie crust for lots of things. You can make empanadas with it, put meat in there, which I will make empanadas and show that on a later video. For now, I'm focusing on this apple pie. So that looks about good enough there. So I'm going to set that aside, reflour my surface, and then unwrap the other one and get that one prepped to go on top of this one. And you want to always roll from the center out. See if I can get that to match back up a little bit better. The top part isn't quite as important because you don't have to cover quite as much ground with it, so to speak. And then the same thing, I just want to kind of fold this over in half on itself, peel that up, set it aside, and then I'll just lay that, once I fill the pie pan, I'll just lay that one across the top, crimp the edges together, and there you go. So that's how I do pie crust. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.